I'm Peggy Farren, and you're watching the Understand Photography Show, where we talk about travel, nature, and fine art photography. My guest today is Kathleen Clemons. She is an amazing flower photographer, and she uses Lensbaby lenses a lot. So we're going to talk about lighting and color and Lensbabies. We're going to talk about how she got noticed, how she makes money. We're going to talk about a whole bunch of stuff. So stay tuned. And welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you very much.
So give us a little bit about your background, just a little bit, the short version. Now,
Sure.
How long have you been a photographer, a professional photographer, that kind of stuff?
Sure. I didn't start shooting anything beyond automatic until 2003. I took my first photography class then because I had sort of a good eye for composition, I was told, but I did not understand the technical whatsoever. So that's when I took my first class. My degree is in teaching. So having the ability to combine my love for photography with my love for teaching is just an ideal way to spend my life.
Okay. So you took the class and you said to yourself, okay, this is something I want to do. Is that kind of how it went?
I actually took the class because my mother was diagnosed with melanoma, and I know myself well enough to know that I was going to need an outlet for my stress. And art has always been that for me. And I was always the one with the camera, but I didn't know what I was doing. I love to take photos, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I took that first class. I took Understanding Exposure online with Brian Peterson. And Brian is very gifted at making the technical very simple. And by the first lesson, I was like, oh, because then it made sense for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So have you always been drawn to flowers? Because you do a lot of flower. Go ahead.
I do. That was kind of an accident. After I took the initial class with him, I signed up for a second one on stock photography. And you had to choose one topic and stick with that topic for 8 weeks. And I live in Maine, and it's February. And I ended up that week that the first assignment was due in the hospital with a kidney stone that wouldn't pass. So I got home, my assignment was due. And my husband had bought me roses when I was in the hospital. Shot the roses, and before the class was over, I'd signed with my first stock agency to handle my flower photos. And so I just kind of fell into it. It wasn't intentional at all.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah.
So let me just ask you this. How did you, since you were kind of new at it, how did you sign with a stock agency? Did you go online and apply? And
well, Brian was with this agency, so he introduced them to my work, and I sent them some samples, and they signed me right away.
Oh, so referrals are really good.
Yeah, it's nice to know people. Yeah. And and it just originally I didn't shoot only flowers. I still don't shoot only flowers, but I'm known for my flowers, and I've embraced it. I love them. What I'm attracted to in my work is curves, and flowers are full of curves. Flowers are about line, shape, color, and texture. And I mean, those are wonderful elements to photograph. So I don't have a problem at all being known as a flower photographer.
So did you have to train your eye? Like you said, oh, I like curves. Did you know you like curves, or you just started getting into the close-ups and say, well, the curves are cool, and then I'm going to start looking for curves? How do you train your eye to see these things?
I see the world through little bits and pieces. The macro world is much easier for me than large scenes. I seem to see details, and I had no idea that I was attracted to curves until one day I was looking at a whole set of my photos on a large screen monitor, and I sort of had an epiphany, and all I could see were curves.
Oh, and so now, once you had your epiphany, now all you see is curves.
Oh yeah. Now I think all I did see was them before. I just didn't know it. But now I recognize it in my work all the time.
Do you have any suggestions if somebody says, hey, I want to, really learn how to take great pictures of flowers, and I take them and they just look like I took them with my cell phone?
Yeah. Well, I take them with my cell phone too.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying. It looks looks like anybody could have done this.
Yeah, the most important thing is to choose good light. People will say to me, your flowers are so soft and dreamy. What is your secret? I don't have any secrets. First of all, I'm a teacher, and I believe if you teach, you shouldn't have secrets. That's a whole nother story.
I agree with you.
Yeah, but if I have a secret, it's that I use soft light. An overcast, bright, cloudy day is just ideal. If you're using strong, harsh light, you're going to have a contrasty background. You're going to blow out the texture, the color, the light. So that's primarily. If I could tell you one thing to make your flower photos better, it would be to use soft light.
What do you have any suggestions on somebody? Okay, so I want to use soft light, and I live in Florida where we don't have much soft light. We have a harsh, blazing hot sun. So what do I do if I'm out and it's a beautiful field of flowers and I want to take some pictures of the flowers? How do I make the soft light?
You buy a diffuser.
Okay.
I use one that's 12 inches, folds up to a tiny size, and you just put that between the light source, which would be your sun, and your flower, and you can soften the light. I can shoot flowers all day long, no matter how harsh the light is, by using a diffuser. I have something called a plant clamp that I clamp the diffuser onto a tripod leg, because I wish I had an assistant full time. That'd be really nice. Carry my bag, hold my diffuser. I don't have that life. So, just attaching that 12-inch diffuser, and they're about $12, to my tripod. I can set it up, put it between my subject and the light, and I have soft light.
And you attach the diffuser to the clamp? Is that what you said?
Yeah, the clamp is, I wish I had one with me. It's sort of a foldy, bendy little thing that has clamps on two ends. So one end goes to your tripod, and the other end goes onto your diffuser. And unless it's horribly windy, it's not going to hold, but then your flowers are going to move anyway, and it's probably time to move on to a more sheltered spot. But yeah, they work really well. You can also, if you need more light, let's say that the flower has a lot of shadow underneath it, and you want to bounce some light, you can use the same clamp attached to a reflector and bounce a little bit of light up under your subject. What you're looking for is an even light across the subject.
Okay, so you don't work with the shadows so much, or?
Soft shadows add depth, hard shadows add hard lines, and flowers are one of the components of a flower is line, and you don't want to introduce new lines that chop up your petals.
Ah, good advice. So what if, so the diffuser, so if it's a harsh, like a 2 o'clock in the afternoon sun, it's probably just best not to even take pictures of flowers then, if you can, because they're going to have harsh shadows even with a diffuser, right?
They're not.
They're not?
Yeah, you can, all day long. When I teach workshops, we don't take a break. We shoot all day from, about 8 to 5, and I'll give them a lunch break, but we shoot all day.
One break. So if you had 2 of those clamps, those things are about $40, I think. I have one, but I keep saying I want to learn flower photography, and I just don't take the time to do it because I don't know why. I just don't. So,
come and visit you.
Pardon me?
I need to come and visit you.
Oh, come on down. I got a spare room. Although it's pretty full in the winter, as you can imagine. Everybody comes to Florida in the winter, so when it's beautiful, like right now. All right, so the lighting is the most important. What if you're inside and you want to, like I took a class. I did take a flower photography class at. I was one of the speakers at that Southwest Michigan Camera Club conference, I think is what they call it, SWMC. But they had a speaker who was teaching flower photography with the Lensbaby, which I believe you do as well. But she had flowers inside the room with the fluorescent lights. What do you think? What do you do in that case if you're inside, like in a classroom or something with those horrible lights?
Right. That could be pretty tricky. Hopefully there's a window in the room, and you'd head over to the window. You don't want your flower in the direct light, move it far enough away so you get the light from it, but it's not really strong. Really look at your flowers. See if your petals look like they're catching too much light, if they're blowing out. You can still use a diffuser with window light if you need to be close to the window, but generally moving your subject a little further away will take care of that. Fluorescent lighting is tough, but I was just at Photo Plus Expo, spent 3 days in the Lensbaby booth teaching people how to use Lensbabies. And, you know, in the Javits Center, it's some pretty strong fluorescent lighting. I just set my white balance to compensate for it, and it was just fine. I mean, that ceiling's really high, so the light isn't going to be directly on the flowers, but it worked. People got some beautiful stuff. It was just fun to see their reactions when they, you know, shot the flowers with a Lensbaby and saw what it can do. Lots of fun.
All right, so the white balance. So if you're in bad lighting, not bad lighting, but a weird color lighting, change your white balance.
Yeah, people will say, well, I use auto white balance, I'll change it later. And my question to them always is, will you remember the color of this flower? No. Most of the time it's no. So why not do it right at the time? You know, have a look at the back of your screen, check your exposure, also check your white balance and see if the color looks accurate to what you're seeing at the time, because people don't remember what it looks like. And if you know, and that's fine if you want to make the white balance your own and change the color, but if you want to accurately capture that flower, the color it is, then set your white balance to the light that you have.
Yeah, that's great advice. What about using like a light tent or something like that? Do you do anything like that?
I bought one 2 years ago. I bought one 2 years ago. It's still in the package.
Okay. Like my lamp. I bought a lamp a couple of years ago.
Same thing. I have large windows in my house, and I bought something last year, which is working out really well for me to shoot inside. It's made of foam core, and it's a large sheet of foam core, and it has two side elements. Think kids' science fair displays, but it's in foam core. So it stands up by itself because it's foam, which is great, because I used to just lean foam core against a stack of books or something to get it straight. But now it stands up on my kitchen table or on my living room floor, and I can attach backgrounds to it, fabric, you know, anything I want to change the background with clothespins at the top, and the side panels bounce light. It's white foam core, and it's working beautifully for me. I broke my ankle last April and had to shoot inside because I wasn't allowed to walk on uneven ground. And I would have gone crazy not to be able to shoot for 4 weeks. I mean, that's like breathing to me. So worked so well. It's a simple,
and is that just something you get in an office supply store?
Yeah. At Walmart or Staples, any place like that. You know, they used to make them out of brown corrugated cardboard, and now they're foam core. So
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great advice too. You're just full of good advice so far. Okay, so let's talk about depth of field, because of course, the Lensbaby we're going to talk about too, but first I want to just talk about, you know, people with just regular old lenses.
Sure.
And so you use both, you know, in your pictures. It looks to me like sometimes you have a great depth of field where everything is nice and sharp, and sometimes you've got that soft fuzzy look too, which is kind of cool too. So, I mean, how do you determine like how you're going to do that? And what if somebody is here with you know, they're listening or watching and they have a kit lens, you know, 18 to 55, f3.5 is as wide as they can go. What can they do? Can they do anything with that?
Sure. I mean, f3.5 is great. If I don't shoot with a Lensbaby, I shoot with my Canon 180 millimeter f3.5 lens. It's a great lens for when I want a lot of detail. More often than not, if I'm reaching for the 180, it's because my subject isn't close to me and I can't get to it. If you're shooting in a public garden, you're not allowed to step in the garden bed. You're not allowed to put your tripod legs, if I used a tripod, another subject, in the bed. So that is the only time basically that I'm using the 180 these days, or to do a technique that I call shooting through, where you put foreground foliage or foreground blossoms right up against your lens, find an opening and shoot through it. So it creates a veil of color in the foreground. It's a beautiful effect. But to be truly honest, I have carried that 180 millimeter lens in my bag this summer, and I have not taken it out once.
Wow. So what is your favorite? What is your favorite lens that you mostly use?
Well, My favorite Lensbaby is the one I have on my camera at the time, and that's truly honest. I love them all, and I use them for different things, but this has been the first summer that I haven't used the 180.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So how do you still, the question is, how do you determine if you're going to keep a
Sure.
great depth of field, or is it
Right.
because you need to isolate, you'll use a shallow depth of field, or you just want that soft look, or how do you decide, or do you just
Sure.
play around with everything?
No, it's generally I have a vision for the photo before I take it.
You have a
And
mission?
yeah, I see the photo as to,
Okay.
yeah, and I usually am honing in on something that caught my eye. I don't like flowers that look like every other flower. I'm always looking for a flower that has a funky petal, a crazy curve, a space, something that makes it different, individual, and makes it stand out from all the other flowers. That's what I'm looking for. So generally, I will choose my aperture by how much of an area I have to get in focus to draw your attention to that. People will think that you can shoot everything wide open for selective focus, but that might not get me a whole curve in focus. It might get me part of a curve.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so the secret to that is to knowing your equipment. I can look at a subject and say, all right, I'm going to need f4 for this. No, this is going to take f8. Know your gear. That's the only secret to that. And that just takes experience. Put your lens on your camera, try every aperture, and get to know a particular lens so you know what it does. So I don't even have to think about that now, which is wonderful. But if you've got a kit lens and you cannot get close, then, rather than buying a new lens, get a set of extension tubes. Extension tubes allow you to focus closer, so you'll be able to fill the frame. They also reduce depth of field. So if your lens is an f6.3 lens, you'll be able to get selective focus and a softer, dreamy look with extension tubes.
Ah, that is good advice. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the Lensbaby. Now, when did you discover the Lensbaby lenses?
I've been shooting for 2 years. I took a workshop with Tony Sweet, if you know Tony.
Yeah.
And there was a woman on the workshop that it was in New Hampshire, and it rained the whole time. Tony says to this day it's the only one he's ever done that rained the whole time. And so we were wandering through the woods shooting, and I'm dragging my tripod around, and there's this woman hand holding, and she's just flitting around shooting. And I said to Tony, how come she's not using a tripod? And he said, well, she's using a Lensbaby. And that intrigued me. And then when we shared our work and I saw what she did, it blew my mind, and I had one ordered the night that I went home.
So
Yeah.
what was your first one? Or there was only one in the beginning, right?
Yeah, well, it was the second one. The Lensbaby 2.0 was the one that I started with. The one before that was the Lensbaby original.
Okay.
The 2.0 is a little sharper, and it was an old bellows model where you had to squeeze the bellows to focus. And like I said, I sort of see the world in bits and pieces and in selective focus. Like when I took Brian's understanding exposure class and got to the lesson on depth of field, I was like, oh my God, I can control that. I can say, look over here. Don't even think of looking over there. I can blur a messy background. I can hide things that I don't want you to see, which is really powerful for me in my work. So being able to do that and to show the way I see with a lens was amazing, because one of Lensbaby's slogans is see in a new way, but for me it was let me show you how I see.
Now
So
if someone's not familiar with the Lensbaby, will you explain what a Lensbaby does?
Sure. And that would have been easier about 5 years ago when were just a couple, but Lensbaby is a whole line of lenses now.
Okay.
But the ones that people are probably most familiar with are selective focus lenses. And so you end up with a sweet spot of focus surrounded by blur, and you can tilt your lens like a tilt shift and move that sweet spot of focus wherever you want it in the frame. And when you tilt, you cause directionality in the blur and you cause distortion in your background. So it's not flat blur like a Gaussian blur. It has depth, it has distortion, it's mind-boggling. And it works on the Lensbaby's composers now work on they used to work on a bellows system. Now it's a ball and socket design, so they stay where you put them. So you could bend towards your subject and then change your aperture and not have to refocus, recompose. With the bellows, if you let go, you lost it. You know, you lost
Yeah,
your focus.
I have the Lensbaby Spark, the really I think it's like, I think I paid more, but I think now you can get one for about $90.
Yeah.
And it's got the bellows, and it takes a lot of practice to learn how to use that thing. I mean, it's just really hard to get things in focus once you get the hang of it.
Yeah.
It's not too bad. What I like about that thing, it weighs nothing. I always just stick it in every bag. It's always with me because it's so lightweight.
Right. And now with the composer, it's part of an optic swap system where you can take sort of the guts and the glass out of it and replace it with another one, so that has a different focal length or a different effect. So you're not buying a whole new lens. But then they make great lenses now. They make the Velvet series, which for flowers is just amazing.
And what does that do?
The first time I used one, and every time I tell the story, I cry, so I'll just warn you. I was shooting with the Velvet. It was winter, and I'm shooting in this room that I'm in now because it has some really nice natural light, and really hadn't looked at the back of my camera. Shot 5 or 6 shots, and then looked at the back of my camera, and I started to cry.
Wow.
Because what I see was on the back of the camera, right out of camera. One reason. The second was I knew that a lot of my best work was ahead of me, and which is so powerful for a photographer. And it still affects me, which is, I don't know where that comes from. I don't apologize for crying anymore. I cry because I feel. So that's not a bad thing in this world. But anyhow, but that's how it affected me. So there are 2 Velvet lenses now, and they just came out with a brand new one a couple of weeks ago, which is called the Soul, which is great for people who want to try Lensbaby, don't want to spend a lot of money. It's $199. It's 2 things that make it different. One is that it has a fixed aperture of f3.5. So that takes the what aperture do I use right out of it. You know, it's f3.5. And it bends. Like the others do, but the other thing that makes it different is has these 2 little aperture blades that you can pull in front of the lens, and it creates texture in your background. So textures are huge right now, and you can get it in camera with this. Or you could choose not to have the blades or one blade. You can change the direction of the lines and the texture. It's so much fun to play with, so much fun.
And that's the Velvet?
Nope, that's the Soul, Lensbaby Soul.
Oh,
it's brand new.
That's the Soul. So what's the difference between the original, is it Composer, and the Velvet? I didn't understand that.
The Composer is the one that's part of the optic swap system, and it's the bendy one. It's a little trickier to use. It's more like your Spark result-wise. The Velvets don't bend. It's a solid, straight lens, creates a dreamy, ethereal look, wide open, and that's reduced. You get more definition as you stop down. But even at f16, there'd still be a little bit of the effect around the edges. So it's beautiful for portraits. Using the Velvet 85 a lot for portraits, and for flowers, it's just stunning. And that's what you're seeing in my work from this year. Is a lot of Velvet shots, or the Lensbaby Composer Pro with the Sweet 50 optic, which just means 50 millimeter.
So if somebody wanted to start, you recommend that Soul. What is this, Soul 45?
Yeah, it's called the Soul. The Soul 45 is for full frame, and the Soul 22 would be for micro 4/3. It's specific for that. Yeah, it's a quick, easy, basically, because you're not working with aperture, you tilt, focus, and shoot. And it's real fun, just to get into seeing, is a Lensbaby for me? How do I use one? You don't have to spend a fortune to try it.
Now, can you get it? All right, I assume they have Nikon mounts and Canon mounts. And
yeah, Olympus, Sony, Fuji, the
really?
works. Yeah.
Anything. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Now, so that is that mostly how you get that dreamy look from using the Lensbabies?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's selective focus, or it's the Velvet, one or the other.
Now I'm still on Lensbaby. What else can you do? You said the velvet is good for portraits. Excuse me, all of a sudden what else can you do with a Lensbaby? Or does it
Oh,
depend on what kind? Because
yeah,
every time I see Lensbabies, everybody's just shooting flowers, it seems
yeah,
like.
yeah, and they're definitely not just for flowers. Part of the optic swap system are some optics that create a slice of focus through the frame instead of a spot. So think about that. You can tilt a slice, so you could use it for a landscape. You can create that miniature effect, which is pretty cool, and it's also really nice for portraits as well if you keep it straight and don't bend it.
What one is
So
that?
those are the Edge series optics. They just would pop your optic out of your composer and put in a different one, or you buy it with one to start with, and then you can swap them in and out. So that's cool too.
All right, so let's get back to how do you determine how close to crop an image? Do you you want to get the edges of the flower? Do you want to crop them in tight, or does it depend?
Right. Now you're talking cropping in camera, not because I don't crop in Photoshop.
You shoot exactly how you want it.
Yeah, what you see is what I shot.
Awesome. Okay. Wow,
Well,
that's amazing.
because I have that photo in my head, and I'm getting it in camera. A couple of things. I mean, with today's cameras, you can crop, that's fine. But I think if you tell yourself, I'm not going to crop this, it's going to make you slow down. If you slow down, you're going to be more careful. You're going to be careful with your focus. You're going to be careful with your exposure. You're going to be looking around all the edges of the frame for anything that doesn't belong, and then you can move in closer. You can change your point of view. You can fix things at the time. I love to play in Photoshop. Don't get me wrong. It's a blast. But if I don't have to, and I can get the photo in my head to come out my camera, that's going to be my choice.
Wow. So that's actually a really good tip, because I think so many of us get lazy because we can. Oh,
Sure.
there's a million pixels in this picture, I can just crop it later.
Right.
But
The other thing is, if you have all your pictures, like all your pixels rather, I was approached by a company that wanted to license probably 4 or 5 of my photos wall size. They were to go in a hospital, in a new maternity wing. My beautiful soft, most of them were yellow flowers. If I'd cropped, I couldn't sell those. You know what I mean? I need all my pixels to go wall size. So you have to think about that, if you want to be able to make a large print, or who knows when that, agency is going to call you and want to license your photo, but they're going to want full frame, all my pixels.
now, as an artist, so since you do all of your cropping when you take the picture,
Yeah.
do you only sell that ratio size? Like what if, so say, our most, I don't know, what kind of camera do you shoot with?
Canon 5D Mark IV.
Okay, so you're shooting in a, 2:3 ratio, right? Yeah. Is that the only size that you'll sell? Like, what is it? That's like an 8:12 or I'm not that good at math. 20:30, I think.
Yeah, I don't,
What if somebody wants
for flowers, I leave it at that ratio. If I'm, shooting landscape, sometimes I'll do a panel, definitely. But for flowers, no, I don't change it. I'm not a big fan of square flowers unless the shape of the flower is very symmetrical. So I'm happy with my rectangles.
So with your rectangles though, do you have empty space on the ends then?
Well,
or do you shoot vertically or horizontally or both?
Both. A very, very important thing to do is because if I had all horizontals and somebody wanted to do a magazine cover, they'd be like, do you have a vertical of this? Why, yes, I do, as a matter of fact. So you have to think about that as well. But, I don't only shoot full frame flowers. I love to include background, because there's my challenge of blurring it and choosing a lens that will get me the blur that I want. If you shoot everything full frame, then the next person who comes by could shoot that same full frame. But if you're including background and choosing to blur it and making it part of your composition, it's more challenging, but often so much more beautiful than only including just the face of the flower.
Okay. All right, so now we've taken the picture. What about, and so you said you don't use a tripod very often anymore,
I use a tripod for landscapes.
but not for your flower photography. That's
Never,
interesting. And that's
never.
because of these Lensbaby lenses?
Well, it's because I have strong arms right now. That's part of the reason. Um, uh, and that's great for now. If I find that I can't get good focus, I'll use a tripod. But for now, I have strong arms, and it's not necessary. You have to realize that I'm shooting in a lot of light, and I'm using large apertures, which let in a lot of light. So I've got a good fast shutter speed. I've got a camera that I can up the ISO if I need to, but I generally don't need to. If you're shooting everything under f4, you've got so much light that it's not an issue for me.
Wow. I mean, I use a tripod, but I always hate it.
Yeah. It's hard to get into the positions I need to get in. Sometimes I'm like a little pretzel. And that is difficult with a tripod, but I definitely will, if I find that I'm not getting the selective focus that I love, if I'm not getting an area of sharpness where I want it, then I'll start using a tripod. But right now, I'm really happy not to have to.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, so now you've shot exactly how you want it, so you're not going to be cropping.
Right.
What happens? How much work do you put into editing?
Sure. That's going to depend on the photo and sort of the idea I have for it when I shot it. One of the best things about my Lensbaby images is they need very little post-processing. Perhaps, I open them in RAW, shoot in RAW, open in RAW, check my exposure, might warm it or cool it off if I need to, but I don't do a whole lot to them in RAW. And I'll open it in Photoshop. If there's something that I wasn't able to blur that needs to go, a flaw in a petal, if my focus isn't an aged flower, if it's pristine flower and there's a little flaw or a little bug that I couldn't persuade to leave, so I could take, then I'll take that out, and do a levels adjustment if necessary. But with the Lensbaby stuff, that's basically done. So I don't do a whole lot of editing. If I want to add a texture to the background, then that's a process that I'll do. And I will say that the softness of the Lensbaby blur lends itself beautifully to adding a textured background.
And now, for beginners, when you add a texture, you're in Photoshop, I'm assuming, right?
You are, or you can print that texture and hold it behind your subject, put it right up against that science project board that I told you about. And then the beauty of doing that is you can stop down and not worry about bringing the background into focus, because if it comes into focus, it's a texture. So.
Wow, that's
well too. But in Photoshop, what you would do in Photoshop is open the texture and your image that you want to add the texture to on your screen, and you drag the texture on top, and then you will go in to your layers and choose a blending mode, and then mask the texture off anywhere where you don't want it to be on your subject. That's the quick how to add a texture. I did a book all about textures, how to make them, how to find them, how to use them, how to add them in software, all of that in ebook.
Oh, okay. And is that on Amazon?
It's on my website.
It's on your website. Well, tell me your website right now.
KathleenClemons.com.
That's pretty easy. Yeah, I mean, textures, I don't know why people get hung up on thinking that layers is hard, but once you get layers, kind of everything about Photoshop becomes a little bit easier. And textures are really, really fun. Yeah. And blending modes are fun. You can just keep choosing a different one till you find the one that you like.
Yeah.
So do you is that what you do? You just kind of play around to see how heavy you want the texture? Or
it's going to depend. Yeah, it will depend on the background. Are there things that I need to hide? I never want the texture to become a secondary subject. I want it to add to my image. I don't want it to take over as the subject, as, oh, look at that texture. I want it to enhance. So I tend to have a light hand. That's one of the biggest issues I see with people having trouble with textures, is that it's too dense and it takes over, can become the subject.
Okay. Interesting. Now you sell your images. Well, you said you sell them through stock agency or more.
Yeah.
How else do you sell your images? Or
Uh,
is that
I,
the only way?
I'm not good at printing. My New Year's resolution this year was to print more, and I have. Have I printed what I should? No, not yet. But hey, there's next year. Got to work on that. And I sell some from my website, but I don't actively market prints heavily. I can only do so many things, and that's probably just use.
No, boy, can I relate to that. I feel like
Yeah.
I'm spinning plates all over the place all the time.
Right.
So,
I'll print if someone sees an image that they want me to print, but I have a whole pile of prints stacked up in the house because, then where do you put them? What do you do with them? I donate a lot of prints for auctions and charities and that sort of thing. So I do have some always on hand.
okay. So how do you make your money?
Um, Teaching, selling textures, teaching workshops, primarily my teaching.
Okay, that's interesting. Are you still selling your images stock too through stock agency?
Yeah, and more often than not, recently with stock, I'll be approached, like I was approached by the agency that had seen my work and wanted it for the hospital. More that sort of thing than stock. Stock just doesn't really pay anything anymore.
Yeah,
And I'm not even great at uploading the images anymore. But people find me at this point, which has been really nice.
that is nice. And how do you think they find you? Why do they find you?
I don't know. The agency with the hospital said that the buyer knew my work, and so I have no way of knowing where they found me. And they approached me to see if I would even consider it. Yeah, wall size, sure. Yeah, so my website, and a lot of people know me now from my Creative Live videos. I've had over 75,000 views. So at the trade show that I was at last week at Photo Plus Expo, I can't tell you how many people came by and said, I've seen you on Creative Live. I have your classes, and so that was just wonderful to hear.
Now, how did you get on Creative Live? That's a big deal nowadays, huh?
It was a big deal. I was actually recommended by my friend Sue Bryce.
Oh,
And,
wow.
yeah.
Now she's a complete portrait photographer. How did you become friends with her?
Yeah, she's photographed me twice, and we got to be friends. And she recommended me to Creative Live. So, and they said that they felt like they knew me from her recommendation, which was wonderful.
That's so exciting. Wow.
Yeah.
I got to go back and find you on there. How long ago was that?
When I was 56, and I'm 61. So yeah, she put a call out to she was doing a series on 50 and Fabulous, and she put a call out for people who were over 50, wanted a portrait done, and I went in my backyard and took a couple of quick self-portraits and in my flower garden, and almost didn't send it in, like, she's not going to pick you, all those things that go through your head as a woman. And then I just suddenly hit send. And about a month later, I got a note saying, "Great, Sue wants to see you in Seattle. Here's your date. You're going." And went and did the 50 and Fabulous shoot with her, which was life-changing as far as self-esteem and learning how to direct people in portraits. And she's an amazing woman. And then when I got back a couple of weeks later, I got an email from her saying, "When can you come back? I have an idea I want to do with you." So I went back, and she did a video of me, all in black and white, talking about what it's like to be this age and my life, basically. So, and there's a link to that on my website as well.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So anyway, it was, long story short, she knew my work. She shot me shooting flowers for one of the shoots, and she recommended me to Creative Live, and I've taught 2 classes for them.
That is so cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 60 in 3 months, and I'm sitting there thinking I need to get a photo shoot,
Yeah.
because I've been working, but I've been exercising and eating right. And all right. So what about social media? Are you big into social media or?
Well, let me tell you.
Let me tell you.
Let me tell you. Yeah. People will say, how do you fill your workshops? I put one, I decided to do one in September, which wasn't on my original schedule. I put it on Facebook at 9 o'clock and it was sold out by the morning.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Is that on a business page or your personal page?
I put it on both. I do have Kathleen Clemons Photography, and then I have just Kathleen Clemons. And on Facebook, yeah.
And how many likes and friends and all that do you have?
Friends is 3,000 something. Instagram is 5,000 something. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that. Yeah, so it really works for me there's my marketing, basically.
Is it Facebook that works better for you or Instagram?
Well, Instagram is more about the photos and sharing the photos because I can't put links to workshops and that sort of thing. And I don't do Instagram stories at this point. And yeah, so basically Facebook, although I have more followers on Instagram.
That's interesting. But
Yeah.
a lot of them are the same probably followers too. They find you on Instagram and then follow you on Facebook maybe,
Yeah. I'm sure I have lots of the same people, but I think in terms of marketing, it's just so easy to do that on Facebook and Instagram. It's working. It's working for me. So
That's not a real big. Well, how many likes did you say you have on Facebook? You have 3,000 friends, right?
yeah,
How
3,000
many
something
likes do you
on
have?
Facebook, and
No, I don't think the likes really count as much because I don't think Facebook shows your business page to anybody anymore unless you pay them,
yeah, right.
because that's what I did. I've got the top number of friends on Facebook now, and I'm slowly actually cleaning them out because I have all these friends and then you can only have 5,000. You can't have
Right.
more than 5,000.
Yeah.
So I'm slowly people who are not really my friends and
Yeah.
not photographers
Right.
because I'm teaching like you are. That's how a big part of my income.
Yeah.
And the people who I don't really know and they're not photographers, I'm kind of like slowly getting rid of them to let more photographers in there.
Right.
Because
That's kind of my criteria for friend acceptance. If I go in and you are a photographer and you're shooting, then yeah.
you have a much better chance of being your friend, right?
Yeah, exactly. But you're right. I do get a better response from my friend's page, my personal page, just the Kathleen Clemons, than I do with the Kathleen Clemons Photography. I don't think people are seeing it.
Yeah, you have to pay now, I think. I think I read that they only show your post to 2% of the people who like your page.
Wow.
And that's not very many, I mean, you have to have a lot of people. So I do the same thing. I post it on my business page and then I share it on my personal page.
Right.
So it's still on the business page, which is where, that's the more professional place to put it, it seems, right?
Yeah.
Now you do a lot of public speaking as well, don't you?
I have been doing more, speaking at conferences and that sort of thing, and that's a lot of fun. That's a lot of fun.
You weren't you? You spoke at NECCC, didn't you?
I did. Yeah, I
Because
did.
I wanted to meet you, but I didn't get a chance.
Great.
Sorry.
It was my first experience with NECCC. It was wonderful, so well organized, and it was great. I did 3 presentations, and I did a hands-on 3-hour come try a Lensbaby with people, which went for me by in I swear it was 10 minutes because I was so busy, and it was just fabulous. Learning hands-on is the best way to do it with something new, and it was great.
I agree. I mean, I had, I bought that little Lensbaby Spark, and then I never ever had a chance to try another Lensbaby until this summer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't live in a populated area. We don't have any camera stores or anything like that where I live,
I don't even have a stoplight in my town, so.
You don't even have a stoplight?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that blows my mind.
Well, there's a couple that just blink, but not like 3 color. No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if NECC stands for New England Camera Club Conference, and it's the largest camera club conference in the United States. It's
Right.
always in July, I believe, and it's always in Amherst, Massachusetts, which I think they say Amherst. They told me no H, don't say the H. And
Yeah.
that was a big deal. We have a conference here in Florida, the Florida Camera Club Conference, and I think we get 300 or 400 people, and it's a really good conference. So when I went to NECCC and there were, what was it, 1,200 people?
Yeah, it was a lot.
It blew my mind. It was, and holy moly, the people who ran it were just amazing because it was
Yeah, I
very,
thought so.
very well done. So
Exactly.
I hope they invite me back. I know they don't have the same speaker every year, so.
Yeah, I hope the same thing for me.
So what other, do you have, like, do you feel like, do you work in projects, or do you just kind of like, oh, I gotta shoot, I'm gonna shoot whatever today?
Right. If
Do you go out with something in mind?
sometimes, I'm working on a new texture collection. So I have certain subjects in mind for that. And so I went out the last 2 mornings because I thought it was done. And then I started shooting for it with the new Lensbaby sole that adds the textured background.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this collection that I thought was done, I'm not so sure it's done now. And I keep my collection small, to only 9 textures. And I'll have about 30 probably when I start to narrow down, because I buy a lot of textures, but I don't like really large sets, because then it turns out there were 3 that I liked. So I want to keep my price down and keep mine smaller sets so that you don't end up with a whole bunch that you're not going to use. So I'm really fussy about my textures and narrow them down and try them with a lot of different subjects, testing them. So if I have that in mind, like I do right now, that I had a couple of new ideas yesterday, and I'm going to head out today because it's overcast. Be beautiful it's going to be a painted leaves collection is the name of it. So right now with the autumn leaves, and there's still some green and a lot of yellows, I have some new ideas. So yes, but otherwise, no. Every morning I have a big garden, and I plant what I like to shoot, basically. So I usually start my day outside, wandering around my yard, seeing what has come into bloom. I have them planted on all different sides of the house, so there's always good light somewhere. And morning light is best for flowers anyway, because the wind is still. I live right on the ocean, so I have less wind at that time. And I'll just wander around and see what came into bloom overnight, what looks good. And then I have a botanical garden about an hour away from me, but I never go with a particular subject in mind. I leave myself open to what I'm going to find, what catches my eye.
Now, isn't it, I mean, you live in Maine. Your garden's not going to be there much longer, is it?
I still have a couple of diehard dahlias and some cosmos blooming, but no, it's days we're talking now. Yeah, it's
So
starting to get chilly.
what do you do with yourself in the winter?
I process all the photos I didn't all summer. That's the easy answer. I mean, I have flowers from Charleston last March that I shot that I haven't processed yet. I'll look through them quickly. If something catches my eye, I'll process it, but it's just very busy around here. My husband's a lobsterman, so this is his busy season. And I do help him with the business a bit. So, and I've got 7 grandchildren, and life is really busy. So winter is that time, and I wrote the book last winter or the winter before, and I have an outline for a flower photography book. So if we get a lot of snow, I'm hoping to get that done this winter, get it beyond the outline stage. So yeah, so I have plenty to do in the winter.
That's exciting. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
So you've got coming up, hopefully, you've got your more textures coming out, and your website is KathleenClemons.com. Pretty easy. What else are you selling on your website besides the textures?
My book. Well, yeah, I sell my book, and I did put a print page up, just because people are like, oh, I want to be able to buy your prints from your website. So I added a print page. Have I sold a print since I heard that? Put a print page up. No. So,
you never know. People see it and they may, put it in their mind and, whatever. So.
And I just did a calendar of all dahlias that I shot this year in September and October. 12 months of dahlias.
That sounds wonderful. I love flowers. I love calendars with pictures. All right. So KathleenClemons.com. Is there anything else you want to tell our audience?
Get out and shoot.
Get out and shoot. Well, thank you for being on the Understand Photography show.
Thank you for having me. It's been lots of fun.
Well, I learned a lot on that episode. I hope you did too. Thank you so much to Kathleen Clemons for meeting me here on the internet to have a remote interview. She's in Maine, I'm in Florida, so we are quite far away from each other. I did get to Maine this summer and it was fabulous. Oh, it's beautiful up there, but it's warm here. Anyway, she was an amazing guest. Please check her website out at KathleenClemons.com. And if you like this, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, write us a review on iTunes. Really, really helps us a lot. I'm Peggy Farren. Thank you for watching the Understand Photography Show.